Dr. Heather Bartos. I'm so glad we finally connected. I know we had a few reschedules and I always just trust divine timing. Like it needs to work out when it works out. So just grateful to have you on.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. And we've kind of like done some back and forth, I think, but
Yeah.
we're here. We're
It's
here.
perfect. It's perfect now. So I trust it. So tell me why you went into the field of women's health, OB-GYN. Why did
Yeah,
that?
I
Yeah.
I actually started off in marketing and public affairs. And then around 28, I said, I don't want to do this forever. I wanted to do something more, I thought. And so I started doing public relations for a hospital system in Houston. And then voila, I applied to medical school and got in. And I was the oldest woman in my class at 28.
What?
There were older men, like in their 40s, but I was the old lady.
Spinster.
And I had no intention of going to women's health. I really did a lot of children's advocacy and minority relations kind of work. And so I really thought I wanted something like that. And then I realized that children are sick all the time. And I was sick all the time. And I thought, this is not going to work. So I like to think of women's health as it's the whole like spectrum of a woman's life. So I take care of little ones and like little old Betty White ladies. And then I always joke that I'm like the first pediatrician. If you're pregnant, I like take care of the baby before the baby's even out. So it kind of worked out as it was supposed to. And I then kind of thought, I need something that I really am passionate about. And so it became kind of sexual health was really kind of how that kind of started.
That's really cool. And you're a mom.
I am a mom. In fact, today was the last day of school, but you're going to hear this around the first day of school for next year.
Yeah, but this will air later, early in the fall. But yeah, I know I always respect people who go into that field because I think it's a level of reverence because you're bringing new life in. It's just like being a mom, right? But as your profession, you're literally witnessing the arrival of all these souls into the world. And like you said, nurturing them before they're even born. I've always just respected that field. And I think it's largely been driven by men. Like you said, you were one of the older women,
Yes.
but
It's now become very women driven, like just now.
that's
I mean, I'm
good.
probably in the mid generation because I'm a little bit older. So kind of above me is like kind of the glass ceiling with all the old men. And then now it's pretty much all women kind of
Oh,
below me in the years below me, about 20 years below me, it's all women. And I think because
awesome.
women like going to a woman because we know what period cramps feel like. We know what labor feels like. We know what all these things are.
Yeah.
And while men are great and they can be very sympathetic, they just haven't been there.
Right. Right. I always had a male OB-GYN, all the kids.
Yeah.
And after he retired, I had the same OB. But after he retired, I actually sought out a female for that reason. Because, I'm changing and hormonal and going into menopause. And actually I had a nurse practitioner and then she's like, well, you really need to have a doctor on tap. And so I did. I sought out a female and I'm pleased with that. But I mean, I'm not trying to be sexist and I'm not like trying to stereotype or anything, but you're right. There is this comfortability with having someone who understands the plumbing from a personal internal perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. And you also have a background in the military. You were in the US Navy.
Yes.
And also you were associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I know. I sound really old when you say all that.
But you look super young. So I'm just like, are you like an uber overachiever or what's happening right
It's a
now?
good filter. I just have a good filter on right now. Or maybe it's the Botox. I don't know.
Yeah, you have a youthfulness about you. You have a lot of radiance, but okay. So let's transition into what I'm most curious about. And I expressed this to you before we started recording is, um, when I think sexuality is a trigger word for a lot of people. And especially women, I would say, honestly, mostly because, the whole Me Too movement, I think I referenced earlier with you that there can be some religious based sex shaming, unknowingly, sometimes knowingly. It's almost like you can't own your own body. So there's two things I'm curious about. The first one is, what did you see in your practice with, and was it apparent that women had some kind of body shaming or body inhibition, or what were you experiencing with that as an OB?
Yeah, it's really interesting that our beliefs about our sexuality are cemented by age 8. And
Really?
none of us have any idea what sexuality even could be at age 8, but that's kind of where all of our kind of internal beliefs are cemented. And we get that from our families. So, mom and dad, grandparents, aunts and uncles. We also get that for a lot of people from school and from church. And, so that's a lot of information coming into a young woman, a young girl, about her body and what it means. And, this is a grand time when a lot of young girls are told, don't touch that, that's dirty, that's not what you should be. You should be pure, you should be chaste. I mean, it's kind of prevalent in pretty much all major religions and in all schools. I mean, there's still a dress code for schools for the girls, but
Oh
not
yeah.
for the boys.
My daughter has
And
been sent home for wearing shorts that are too short in
yes,
school.
I mean, they can't wear, like it's here in Texas, it's 100 degrees and they can't wear like a sleeveless shirt. They have to have their shoulders covered.
Hmm.
We hear about this and it's still prevalent. And then, a lot of times families were raised, our parents were raised in the kind of manner that their parents were raised. And so unless someone changes something, we're just kind of passing these generational beliefs down. And yes, a lot of it stems from, especially in this country, puritanical type beliefs.
Yeah, purity
Um,
culture, toxic purity culture. Yeah. Which to
yeah,
me felt like the ideal. I thought purity, well, what's wrong with that?
yeah.
You know what I mean? That was the ideal, the virginal maiden, the modest, sort of conservative, yeah, that perpetual image of the ideal feminine
Hmm.
is it didn't register for me until I was probably in my 40s that that's not healthy. Like at
No,
all.
no, because it lacks education. I think that a woman can choose to live her sexuality how she wants. But I have many couples. I have a young couple that I'm working with right now. Well, they're young, they're 30.
That's young. That's young to me.
It's very young. Raised in a very Southern Baptist type religion and bless their hearts, they got married and they waited until they were married to have sex. And now that they're married, it's been 5 years, they haven't had sex. It's not, they didn't know, he never was taught how to do anything. And so he really was thinking he was kind of asexual. Like he's like, well, I guess I just am not sexual. And I was like, well, are you, or you just need some education on how this works? And she went the opposite way. She started having pain issues with sex because she was taught that you got, keep your legs crossed and keep everything
Yeah.
buttoned up. And so now that she's married, she didn't know how to kind of relax into that new kind of vibe. But again, and they both have left their churches since then. But we're dealing with 30 years of trauma. I mean, really baggage that we had to unpack to get to where they can actually start to have a relationship again. So it's on both sides, women and men. But it's, of course, we see it a lot in women doing what we
Yeah.
do.
That's the good girl syndrome, right?
Mhm.
That your whole upbringing, like, don't think about it, don't entertain thoughts about it, don't touch yourself, don't touch anyone else, like all these things guard you. And there's literally a phrase in my religion of origin, Mormonism, of like to guard your virtue with your life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's like better almost to die than to have your virtue violated.
Yeah.
um so those kind of messages just sort of, and then all of a sudden you get married, because my husband and I didn't have sex after we got married, but like it's like all of a sudden, oh, now anything goes, or what? Like, how do I feel about this? Like, I like overnight, like not even overnight, in an hour after you're married, you're like, oh, my whole world, my whole sexuality is now just supposed to magically blossom and be healthy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And you have a new identity all of a sudden because you haven't been transitioning to a different identity. And I certainly think that that's, a wonderful thing to wait
Yeah.
for sex, until you're
Yeah.
married. or, you know, be intimate until you're married. But I don't think there's a good transition for most people on that. Okay, now what? Because we were taught this, like you said, Madonna versus whore syndrome. You're one or the other.
Yeah.
You're either very pure or you're a whore. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Those are the two options. And you know, you can't be anything in between that. I remember my roommate in college had a book. She was raised in the Catholic faith, and she had a book called Good Girls Do. And it was what you could do that was church sanctioned that wasn't doing it.
Oh, interesting.
And I was always like, what's that book about? Because I wasn't raised in that faith. And I was like, what's in that book? And she kind of was real kind of, she kind of hid it from me, but I should have stolen it, I guess, and read it. But yeah, it's interesting how, you know, and I'm pretty sure the men don't have a book called Good Boys Do,
no,
or whatever it is. I mean, we kind of, you know, celebrate that in men, but it's amazing how many places just don't teach healthy sexuality. And I found out just the other day that only 17 states require sex education that is accurate and up to date. That's it. The whole country, 17 states.
Okay, that's
states
disturbing. Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is a collective wound and a collective confusion. It's you know, I was just listening to a podcast about asexuality, so I got a whole new education on that. And you know, of course, we have the whole spectrum, right? LGBTQ plus IA, you know, and there's more. Yes. And I'm like, this is so interesting that people are now giving voice and sort of normalizing some seemingly dysfunctional as opposed to what normal is. And it's healthy. And I also feel like, you know, I don't know. I just have a lot of respect for this all getting out in the open now, and for people talking about it. It doesn't matter how we feel about it or how what standards we put on it. It's a reality for people. It's part of their identity and all of this. And that's why there isn't a one size fits all in terms of healthy sexuality for everyone. It's very individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to find what speaks to you. And I always call it your inner sexy. That's like, it's just what your kind of vibe and your joy is. And we may have completely different ones. You know, someone may be like, well, you know, I really feel like, you know, 50 Shades of Grey type stuff is my thing. And someone may be like, you know, that's just not my thing. I really am about this. And it's respecting each other's sexuality and what makes each woman sexy in her own way. So, you know, they're not all looking like Bella, Hadid and Gigi Hadid. They're not looking like that. It's celebrating the sexuality that each woman brings to the table, which is really what the kind of divine feminine really is, which is, you know, looking at us. I mean, and one time, a long time ago, women were really respected for sexuality. I mean, that was actually our thing. And then, you know, of course, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but the patriarchy started, and it was, you know, even back in the days of kings, you know, poor Princess Diana had to be proven a virgin before she could marry Prince Charles. Who
did not know that.
Yes, she goes through the test. And they were like, this is so archaic, you know, I mean.
But he didn't have to go through that test.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, he didn't have to go through that. No, we would never make a man do that.
That's insane to me. The double standards. I do think that is shifting, like you said, even with the shift in the percentage of female OB-GYNs that are, you know, now leading the field. It feels like, you know, coming back to patriarchy, because I just cannot help myself. So, and we know patriarchy is not men. It's an ideology. It's a construct. It's institutions. It's systems. It's ideologies. All that stuff. So, with respect to owning your own sexuality, because that's another thing that I was programmed with, that my body, that someday when I got married, that and I don't know that this was explicitly stated, but it was understood that I would have to give myself over. Mm-hmm. And that meant a little bit of a reduction in power. I have a great husband. He could not be more supportive and loving and all of that and sensitive. But I have come across many women who willingly submit sexually, even though their body's saying no, or this is uncomfortable, or I'm not emotionally prepared right now, that that's their duty. So have
Yes.
you ever come across that?
Oh, yes. We see that a lot. And I think you're right. It's not explicitly said. It's almost an undercurrent in our DNA at this point because it's just been so perpetuated throughout time. I remember my mother telling me about how she was, a virgin when she got married and all that stuff. And it was just like it. And I remember asking her, because I like to test my mother a lot when I was younger. That's probably not surprising. And I remember saying, what would you do if I got, what would you do if I went to jail? She's like, well, we would still love you, of course. We
I
would,
totally went through kind of things with
and,
my mom too.
and then I was like, what would you do if I stole something? I would kind of test her with these questions. And I said, what would you do if I got pregnant? And she go, well, we'd be very, very disappointed in you, but of course we would still love you. I was like, whoa, that's like a totally different shift. I could have like murdered somebody and she was like, we would love you. But I was like, if I got pregnant outside of marriage, it was like, the first thing was be disappointed. And the disappointment is that undercurrent of shame. And so you're like, oh, so if I got pregnant, that's worse than killing somebody in her mind.
Oh, well, let me tell you, in my religion of origin, that was perpetuated in my day. That
Yeah.
sexual sin before marriage is next to murder or outside of marriage at all.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting.
It is. And it was just never said, but I just automatically knew right then and there that was, I got a new belief right then and there that this is bad, and I hate the word good and bad because it's just so like it's a spectrum. All of this is a spectrum. And so by saying something's good or bad, we're automatically shaming somebody or we're setting it up for shame and blame and guilt and all those, I call them the three sisters. They're horrible. Guilt, shame, and regret are the three worst sisters. And then that's literally how civilizations kept people in line for back when like there was, fire and you threw your baby in the fire and then the baby died. And they go, oh, you're bad. And that's how they would make sure that you didn't do something again. So they've used it on us. Everybody for eons. And so now here we are and we're trying to break out of it, but it's still there. It's still like kind of just sitting there.
And that's why I believe that's kind of why it's gone underground with like the pornography industry and all this deviation and sex trafficking. It's driven it underground.
Yeah.
Into secrecy and covert behavior. It's heinous. I believe that it can have an evil component, but like what is good and bad? We each need to get that revelation for ourselves. And it's so sacred. I believe one's sexuality is sacred. A shift that I had when I really started studying the divine feminine, because you brought up the divine feminine, is that our sexuality is for us. It's not co-opted for an institution or a partner. It's for us. And that was a whole completely different paradigm shift for me. I'm like, wait, what? That makes total sense. But is that okay? But I don't know. Maybe I should ask the patriarchy because I don't know. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's where it got sourced. Why would I need to go to the patriarchy and say, is that true? Is that okay? Because traditionally that's how it has been perpetuated, is that this this leadership hierarchy or what have you has some say over what happens with my own body. And once I woke up to that, I'm like, oh boy, wow.
And if you ask that question to them, they're going to then shame you to further modify your behavior. And it's so subtle and it's so good. They're so good at it that you don't even know that it's happening. And then it goes on for another few years until you have another little moment. And then, until you really break out of that whole hierarchy and just know it's about you, then, you're going to be kind of in this cycle. And that's how they kind of keep you down.
That's right. And the shame is a powerful force. It
does
keep people in line. It really works, but you have to unpack the trauma of it later. So you talked about having your own inner sexy, but you also share something called the me spot. So I want to understand a little bit more about that. Really intriguing.
Yeah. So the me spot is my podcast. I mean, I always call it's like a podcast blog, and I used it to start educating patients, that I couldn't spend a lot of time with in the office. I'm like, here, listen to this episode on shame or regret or squirting or whatever it was, all the issues that people brought up. And so then it became its own podcast. And I joke that, the G-spot, which is this kind of mystical unicorn of a place that's supposed to hold all this magic, was founded by a male doctor named Dr. Grafenberg, and it's never been really reproduced, but everyone talks about the G-spot. And I'm like, it's not about finding it's the me spot. It's about finding your own area. There's all these different areas. We're like told, okay, now you're supposed to have epic sex all the time. And even if you work full time and you have kids and you have all this, and then on top of that, now there's a new, now I just read there's a new A spot and a U spot. And we just leave women on the scavenger hunt. Yes. I know, like, what another
can't keep up
spot. And I was like, we leave her on the scavenger hunt just to prevent just like normal kind of function. And so I always say, we're not going to follow any G-spot by some guy who didn't know how he has a vagina. We're going to talk about the me spot. It's all about us. And so that's kind of how that started.
So interesting. And you also talk about self-care is BS. You can swear if you want to. Bullshit,
I do.
Right? It's self-care bullshit.
I do. I'm modifying my language today for everybody.
I just swore. I said the word bullshit.
I know. I do. I think that the message that we've been told about self-care is crap. I think that, we look on Facebook and we look on Instagram and we look at kind of what everyone else is doing. And we're like, oh, okay. So to take care of myself, I have to now go to CrossFit 3 days a week. And I have to, eat this macrobiotic kind of whatever diet. And I have to, and so what we end up doing though, is we're like, okay, well, self-care then is wine and crap TV, and then, so we'll go for these extremes, but really self-care is in the middle. And what I tell women is that, like, I used to suck at taking care of plants. I had like a brown thumb. People, good. Plants were not good. And because I treated them all the same. I never read that they come with that little plastic tag that had their care instructions. And I never bothered reading it. I threw them out. So I treated all my plants the same. They got the same amount of water, the same amount of light. I never did anything different. And guess what? They died. And it's because every plant has its own set of instructions, how much sunlight it needs, how much water it needs, how often it should be pruned or fertilized. And that's what we are as women. If I follow what works for you self-care wise, I'm just following your self-care instructions and I can wither. If I follow what I think is right for me, which takes, some knowing yourself. I know that I need this amount of rest a day or this amount of whatever, or I do need some crap TV. I need to watch Bridgerton every, when it comes out, and that's it. Whatever it is, I have to do what's the self-care, I call it self-love, that's really right for my plants and not your plant. Mm-hmm. And if we start looking at our own self-care and not what everyone else is doing, because again, the wine, the bubble bath, that's escapism. That's not really, truly
like really nourishing you at the soul level. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had somebody, I love what you're saying. I do love everything about like the middle path, staying in the middle way, where you're avoiding these real extreme polarities. But I love, I had a teacher once from India. Well, he's still my teacher, Nithya Shanti. And he used to be a monk, and he taught me that if you make a joy list, like you just take everything off the table, what you see on social media, everything that everybody else is doing, and what people tell you should want or not want, and literally just unfiltered, just write down a whole list of things that light you up, that you personally love, even if your partner doesn't like them, or your kids or whoever, or society is telling you not to like it. Or you could even go back to religion. And we're not talking about like devious behavior. We're just talking about lighting up your soul. And I did that. And I refer to that often since I made that joy list. It's like when I am more productive, I am better in my relationships, meaning more patient, more present. When I'm doing those things, when I schedule those things in, or I advocate and set a boundary for like, this is my time to do these things. When I don't do those things, like when I conform and do what everyone else is doing, or like, women, I don't know, I'm a weird woman. I don't love like I never liked mothers groups and sitting around and just kind of like talking about different people or what. I always just loved the depth, tribes that have depth. So I just let go of everything that I was told a good woman should do and want and feel. And then I just wrote it. And that's why you're seeing all the weirdness behind me, like my oracle cards and all the books that I love and my Tibetan sound bowls and my Himalayan salt lamp and all the things, the roses. It's because I finally allowed myself this pleasure of what lights me up. And when I'm talking about intimacy, I'm sure you've heard that play on the word intimacy, into me, I see. If I'm going to be in an intimate relationship with my husband, I make sure that I'm filled up, that I have given myself those markers in my day to be able to come back to who I am. Otherwise, it feels like I'm being taken. That's the best word I have, or robbed even.
Yeah.
I know that's strong language, but like, that's how I feel.
We always say, fill your own cup first. And I always use the example, I think it was Dr. Andrew Weil that talked about the heart, the heart, and women are the heart of the home. We're really the heart of the earth, but the heart actually takes the freshest blood from the lungs right away. It doesn't take the leftovers. It doesn't take, it takes it right away because it has to keep everything else working strongly. So the heart isn't selfish. The heart can't be selfish. It's a heart. And so we think of ourselves as that. If we take the freshest part for ourselves, it's not because we're being selfish. It's because we got to take care of a lot of other things and people generally. And so by filling us up first, we're actually being able to do more work out there for others.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like that oxygen mask first on you kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I want to also ask you about, you talk about remove the princess filter from your life. That is so funny and disturbing and cute and interesting. So tell me about what that's about.
Yeah, it's interesting how advertising and I'm a huge Disney fan, so don't get me wrong. I mean, I love a good princess story as not as much as the next gal, but I didn't really use them a lot with my kids. And the reason is I think it teaches a false narrative of what we're looking for. I really, really did, maybe too much to my naivety. I really thought there was some guy that was going to come rescue me. And I certainly loved playing victim for a while when I was in my early 20s. And I was like, well, this guy's going to come, rescue me. That's what they all do. And that wasn't the case, like in Pretty Woman, she's like, I just need to rescue my damn self. And we're kind of showing all these little girls. It's getting better because Disney's kind of coming out with, and I used to use Disney, but there's other ones too, with more kind of gritty heroines, yes. Moana and Encanto and these kind of everyday gals. But these girls, and I was one of them, I loved wearing the Snow White outfit, and I would fall asleep and I would play that and I would wait to get kissed and wake up. And it really jacked up my relationships and missed me. I was not me in my relationships because I had this princess filter on where I thought, well, this is what I need to do because this is the ideal. This is what I'm supposed to want. And there's times I still have to talk myself out of it a little bit because I still think about, well, why can't my husband just come in and just take over and know and I have to go, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Disney did a real disservice to us in that era. Like
it did. Oh. It did. I mean, even Barbie is now getting better. I remember I loved Barbies, and she was just, and every Barbie thing you played with was, well, Ken's the guy, and Barbie just plays,
Yeah, and I totally remember playing Barbies with my friend Susan, where we would literally pretend one of us got hurt or even raped or something horrible. Yes. So that the Ken doll could come and be like, oh, are you okay? Let me take you away. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And no one, and we all did it. I mean, like we used to pretend to drown in our pool and one of us would play a guy and we would come save the girl. And I was like, this is so, but we do that. And it's play. So we think that it's cute for girls. And we think that it's, it's, oh, that's not bad. I mean, but but all they did was sing to animals.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
They were
they
so
didn't,
sweet and their
they
voices were
were,
so high.
I
And
know. And they got pushed over by everybody, right? The bad one,
but think of the
everyone.
names too. Snow White, definitely
Yeah.
Purity, Sleeping Beauty. Like she's just so docile and
Mhm.
sleeping. Anyway, but I wanted
Yeah.
to speak to this whole masculine and feminine interplay because one of the biggest realizations I had when I kind of went through my feminine awakening was that we are the ones who we are waiting for. That the masculine, we are a prince inside of us. We have that capacity, to go back to that archetype.
Yeah.
We are the ones who rescue us. And we are, been waiting for it to come outside of us. That's not to say that there won't be people to support us and help us or whatever, but even my husband, as much as he loves me and has me on a pedestal and all of that, he's going to keep letting me down because I have a certain standard for myself that I see as creating that support and that strength and that masculine power. And when I realized that I can marry those forces within me, I'm both the prince and the princess, I'm both the king and the queen in some regards, right? That
Yeah.
it was that integration of the masculine and feminine that's actually the last step on the hero's journey, the Carl Jung hero's journey. Sorry, Joseph Campbell, not Carl Jung, but how his last step on that hero's journey is just really anchoring in and integrating those forces within us. That was a huge life changer for me, is to just be like, oh, okay, because it was always outsourcing, always putting it out here and not really
Mhm.
owning that I have that power within myself.
It was very easy. We were led very easily to almost a victim stance. And for women that couldn't, however it was, couldn't get out of it early enough, there's still, and I don't use victim in a bad way or, like a negative way, but they're still victimizing themselves because that's the role they were led to believe was the right role. And I see that in healthcare. Women will be like, they'll come with random vague complaints, and really what it is they're unhappy with something else. And so if I say, well, let's stop playing the victim and let's do this, and some women get really offended by that, even if they say it really nicely. They're like, I'm not a victim. But I need a doctor that's going to rescue me. And I'm like, that's the same thing. It's the same thing as the planet, same thing as everything. Like, no one's going to come at the end of the day. I would say we're kind of born by ourselves and we kind of die by ourselves. I know there can be people around, but that's it. It's your journey. And so we really have to just, like you said, anchor into yourself and know that you're the one that can rescue your damn self.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up because I wondered about that reliance upon a doctor to just tell me what to do, just tell me what to take, and it just precludes you from really just getting that proactivity inside of yourself but I do think more patients are self-educating too. So you kind of probably see both of those ends of the
We
spectrum.
see both. And I do see, I mean, the doctor medicine has been a form of the patriarchy for a long time. And if you watched Outlander, I remember
I love
the
Outlander.
episode
We're
where I
totally caught up on
saw,
all seasons.
yes, the one where she has the baby and they didn't even talk to her. They talked to her husband only. And she was a doctor and they just ignored her. And I'm like, the medicine's been a form of the patriarchy for a long time. And so I think people still think, oh, well, just fix it. There's a magic pill. I'm like, there's no magic pill. I wish there was if there was a magic pill, we would be doing this and I'd be in Fiji right now, like on an island I owned, and I would not be, delivering babies all night. There's no magic pill. And that upsets some people to the point where they're like, then she's just not giving it to me. I have to go find the magic pill elsewhere. And I'm like, there's just no magic pill. I swear to you, I'm not hiding the magic pill.
Yeah.
So medicine's been partly to blame, and we've created victims in women, especially. So yeah, I kind of really talk about patient agency, really taking kind of control of your own healthcare. And certainly, we're consultants, just like anything, if you want to redo your house, you hire a consultant. They're not going to do it for you. We're going to consult. And that's a big shift for a lot of people. They don't like that. They like the kind of just tell me how to fix it.
Yeah, it's almost like a parent-child dynamic, which is patriarchal.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we were trained, is to be in a parent-child dynamic with power over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we're going to take that princess filter off. We're gonna find the inner sexy.
I do like wearing a good tiara though. So if we want
Oh
to wear
yes. Well,
tiaras next
I'm
time,
for
I'm
sure.
game. But it'll be
Yeah,
our queen tiaras, not our princess tiaras.
absolutely. And then we're gonna say self-care is a middle path because it's for us. It's how we do, it's how we oxygenate ourselves and give that fresh blood. I love what you said about the heart. So is there anything else you would add? Like, let's just say, I know because you do talk about this too. Like if there's a woman who is in a painfully sexual marriage where it's sexless or it's just off the table or it's just whatever, it's just gotten really dysfunctional. How would you have her address that?
Yeah, that's a good one because that was kind of my story. Like that's really how I got started in really sexuality because I was personally in a sexless marriage and it was not of my choosing. It was of my husband's choosing. And it's amazing when a marriage or a relationship goes sexless, how many stories we start telling ourselves about what's going on. And so, the stories that I was telling myself, because I had just had another kid, I was over 40, and I thought, that's it, I'm fat. That was the first thing I went to. I'm fat or I'm ugly now, right? I'm over the
Those are
hill.
the
That's
like
the first
go-to
thing.
feminine. Those are the female, like,
The first woman thing you can go to. And then it was, he must be cheating on me. Another good one. That's a good one for me. And then I was like, maybe he's gay. I was like, maybe he's gay. And it was none of those things. But in a wounded state, I shamed him. Like I sex shamed him. And he didn't have good communication skills. He had actually been molested as a child, but never had talked to me about that. And so it was really his own issue, but I made it about me and I made it about much more than if we just had an honest conversation about it. So I had, and not to say that this was completely all my thing, but I had to kind of go back and do some work. And the work that I did was I fixed myself. And there's a great book. I loved it. It was, I read all these books. Oh my gosh. I read every single book out there, Sex Starved Wife and all the sex books out there. And the one that did the most for me was a book called It Takes One to Tango. And it's by a marriage counselor. And her whole premise she was a marriage counselor and her husband, I believe, was a marriage counselor, and their marriage was crap. It was crap.
Oh my goodness.
Going downhill. And so she said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to work on myself. So all she did was she fixed herself. She fixed her own thoughts. She changed the way she thought about herself. And this is why I kind of took this further with sexuality. And I said, if I'm going to be in a marriage, I'm not getting divorced. I was like, I got 2 kids. I'm not getting divorced. I said, so I got to figure out how to make myself happy. So I just focused on me, and not me like in a selfish way, me like, what is it that I want? What do I need? And this is when I started doing my self-care instructions, and it's not about what he is. I'll just show up to the party myself. And, one of my biggest examples I always say is that, I would come out the closet and I'd be wearing some outfit and I'd be like, how do I look? And my husband is a talker, but he's not an effusive romantic man. And so he'd be like, okay, good. And it would it would tear me up. And I was like, why can't you see I look amazing? Well, on our wedding day at the altar, he goes, you look nice. So why was I expecting that now I was going to get, you look hot. Let's go to the bedroom right now. So I had expectations that I had created that were not right. And so I just didn't even need it anymore. I just walked out and I was like, I look good. This looks good. And I stopped asking. And then, the compliments started coming on their
So
own.
powerful. I just want to pause for a second there. That is massive. That takes a lot of self-awareness, self-discipline, self-love. So I just want to applaud that because it
was a very rough time in my life.
but you took that time, and that is self-care. Would you not agree?
That is
the highest form of self-care. Yeah.
That really is what is self-care at its like core. And so I realized I don't need him to say I look amazing. I just had to look at and in the beginning, I'm not going to lie, I was faking it. I was like, you look really good, Heather. Oh my gosh, you look amazing. And I would just kind of then go with it. And I stopped asking. And you know what happens when you stop asking is people start saying something. If I'm not chasing around the room waiting for something good, they come to you. It's just the whole dynamics. And so by that point, I was like, well, I'm on something here. Like this is working for us. And so eventually by not pushing and I'm not chasing, by looking at myself only, he came back to the relationship and it's better than ever. But it took, and I had, I did have to do some apologizing for shaming, because I'm my anti-shame. And here I shamed him. This was about 10 years ago. And so, yeah, so it was rough, but the sexless marriage, and we all do it. We all go through a sexless relationship at some point, whether it's from children or whatever. So really the goal is don't overanalyze why it's happening. Just say, this is interesting. Why is this happening? And say, is it something, is he unhealthy or is she unhealthy, or what's going on? Like, what is it? Or are they going through their own thing? Have they been laid off? I mean, there's so many reasons why we don't want to have sex at any one time. But I think we're just, again, the princess filter is, well, it must be me. I must be horrible. I must look ugly. So it really is, you got to look inside.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to that whole like 1950s housewife type of, just like, well, it must be me. What am I doing wrong? And if I just make him more comfortable, but what you're saying is so much more empowering. It makes the man circle back more, which is like, I'm going to claim happiness for myself. I'm going to seek that validation inside of me. I'm not going to be reliant on his opinion, even though it'd be a nice bonus. That does take quite a bit of self-discipline. So I just want to honor that. And you could literally roll that into everything, not just intimacy and sexuality, but like everything, like your peers, your family, it's just, it all comes back to like, we don't need other people to give us the thumbs up. It would be great. But what it does is it triggers a primal fear of isolation. And that is probably people's biggest fears. They're going to be alone and rejected. And we need that we need our tribes, we need our people. So yeah, so finding that within is where it's at. And I think it's different for everyone, but that's what I hear you saying, is that if you're in a sexless, joyless, whatever relationship, and you're waiting for that person to all of a sudden find you wildly attractive, you've got to find yourself wildly attractive first. And through that confidence and that surety that you hold for yourself, it's an attraction factor for that other partner.
Well, exactly. And that confidence and that surety is the basis of sexy. That's what sexy is. When we look at women that we think, oh, wow, she's so sexy. And I always think of Sophia Loren, who, when you look at her, is kind of just different looking. She's not classically beautiful, but men found her wildly sexy. Why? Yeah. Because she had that I call it the zhuzh, right? She was confident. She was self-assured. She wasn't like, oh my gosh, are you going to call me later? She was like, I can, Sophia Loren. Screw you. I'm Sophia Loren. I can do whatever I am.
A goddess. Yeah. She kind of personifies that like goddess of, knowing and embodied, feminine, flowing, very strong. It doesn't help that she was also very beautiful. Like you said, there are probably, by whoever standards, more beautiful actresses, but it's what she embodied with her confidence. And actually, I minored in sociology in college, and I remember reading the study that was talking about, and it was a large sociological study, like thousands and thousands of respondents, but they polled men and asked them, young men, what they found most, this is like men 18 to 25 or something like that, what they found most attractive in a female, and far and away, it was confidence.
Yeah.
Is like when she cuts herself down, that's totally unattractive. When, we've been programmed to think that this dependent maiden that we were talking about before, like the damsel in distress, is more attractive to men. That it might make them feel a little bit more masculine, that they can go and rescue that, but that's not what they want long term. What they're really looking for is a woman who knows who she is and can, like the Sophia Loren, who just kind of embodies like, I am Sophia.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting. That just stayed with me. I don't know how many years I graduated, like 26 years ago, but it's always stayed with me, that is the attraction factor, is the confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of men will talk about, we did a bunch of surveying of men too. And a few years ago in a recent study, and over and above. We were asking about physical attributes. And the biggest things were eyes, which I believe are just what's behind the eyes, and smile.
Eyes and smile.
There were a few a-holes that, wanted to answer like her butt, and I was like, okay,
whatever.
And those are the men you get if you play Dance on the Stress too long. But and you could tell eyes and smile is what's behind the eyes and the smile. I mean, I can do a fake smile and it's going to be unattractive, or I can just have a natural smile with, lit up eyes. And that's that confidence.
That's so awesome. Yeah. You can only stare at a butt for so long before you don't have a relationship with a butt, but you can look in someone's eyes and see their smile and connect there, right? It's the window to the soul. Oh my gosh. So awesome. So where can people find your offerings online?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram mostly these days. I'm kind of off the Facebook train, but I'm still there too. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Heather Bartos. And then I still have the Me Spot podcast. It's over on Apple and Spotify and all your favorite podcasting apps. And it's about 15 minutes. It's not suitable for work or for kids. I will say that.
Okay, good to know.
I think they marked it explicit because I talk about vaginas and other things. So
why is that even explicit?
I know. I can't even write the word sex on Instagram without getting shadow banned sometimes.
Really?
But yes, like the patriarchy, remember?
Yeah, they're probably in charge of Instagram and Facebook.
Someday. So yeah. So if you go over to Instagram, I'm usually hanging out over there.
Sweet. Well, I'll definitely put that into the show notes. And it's just been a joy to talk to you. It's kind of sparked some deeper inquiry within me around claiming my own style of feminine essence and sexuality. And it's something that I really wasn't even aware of literally until I was almost 50 years old. I'm 53 now. Yeah. Like I just didn't even, I've always felt like a sexual person and sensual and everything, but I wouldn't let myself be a sexual being in and say that I am, if that makes sense, because good girls and good women don't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'm irresponsible. I'm very monogamous and all that, but it's just like, hey, why can't we talk about that? So I love that you have a whole podcast on it, for crying out loud, the Me Spot. So yes, we will have links to that. And it's just been awesome talking to you today.
It's been a pleasure. I've loved it. I'm glad we finally got together.
I know, for sure.